So, the history of food production. So, traditional societies, and some of these still exist in certain parts of the world, but most of them existed in the past, and they probably produced food communally, not exclusively. But for instance, we know that the Kung people of the Kalahari, for instance, who still live relatively separately from the modern state, they tend to hunt communally and divide up food communally among the people. And likewise, we have foraging as well, that is often done communally. So in the rainforest of Central Africa, the Baka people, for instance, forage food in the forest collectively. It is absolutely not the case that production of food was always communal, or is always communal in societies without large governments. It's still the case that certain people might have their own small sort of vegetable plot. They might, if someone hunts an animal or something like that, then their family might get more of it than other people. So it's not just the case that it used to be communal and now it's private or something like that. And then with the rise of large sort of empires or societies, this photo is grain stores in the ancient world. And I think this is ancient China, actually, specifically. And when these large empires sort of emerged, they often had centralized stores of food. So these grain stores, you can see they're really, really massive, and they'd be a lot taller and store tons and tons and tons of grain. So why did that happen? So that's partly just the type of food. So for instance, grain, which was grown, and then you could harvest it, and you could store it and eat it a lot later. Also, it's a type of food where it's not like hunting where you need to be hunting quite regularly. With grain, you can plant it, generally wait months and months, do something else, for instance, and then harvest a lot at one time. But point is, you need to store a lot of it. But the other reason that this would be centralized is it would give the ruler a lot of power. So if the ruler said, look, I've got these big stores where we can store all of our grain and I can protect it from other people who might want to steal it, it also meant that the ruler controlled all the food. So had a lot of power over who got the food and when they get it. But also it means that you can tax the population. If you're a ruler and you say, okay, everyone's storing their food in my central store, then you can turn up at people's homes and you say, I'm taking 30% of this for the central store and you can keep the rest for your family, for instance. And also what it enabled was, rather than a system where very small communities or families produced food for themselves, which might take a reasonable amount of time and a bit of work would be required every day, instead you could have division of labor, whereby you might have some parts of the population, most of the population, farming, producing food, but that would then be stored centrally in cities where then you could have other people doing other things, like, for instance, producing art or building or being a priest or working for the ruler, for instance. So early governments started to control food production as a way of having more power and having people working for them doing other things than just producing food. And also, it allowed the governments to make big investments. So for instance, in the Nile Valley, where farming is very efficient still, and was very efficient in the ancient world, that was partly naturally because it's a river basin, but it's partly that the state invested massively in really expensive projects that required lots and lots of builders and workers, like canals and drainage, or in ancient China, you have terracing of rice paddies.